have one more person waiting.
Live.
Amy, did you say there's a person waiting in the waiting room?
I got
From Glen Valley.
Okay.
Good evening. Time being 6:33. This is the Master Plan Committee meeting for May 8th, 2024. Tonight's meeting will be held at the Municipal Building Training Room, 3rd floor, 355 East Central Street. Note to residents, all citizens are welcome to attend public board and committee meetings in person, and the meetings will also be live streamed by Franklin TV. Recordings of meetings are available on Franklin TV's Franklin Town Hall TV YouTube channel, and additionally, in an effort to maximize citizen engagement opportunities, citizens will be able to continue to participate remotely via phone or Zoom. The link to access tonight's meeting is listed on the agenda. The call-in phone number is 1-929-205-6099 and enter ID 845-01134-237 and then press pound. And again, that call-in phone number is 1-929-205-6099 and enter meeting ID 845-011-34237 and then press the pound symbol. All right, so tonight's agenda, the first thing on our agenda is to accept the meeting minutes for March 20th, 2024 and April 17th, 2024. Any discussion, comments on the meetings minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second?
Second.
All right, looks
Okay.
like we're short one. Actually, no,
Okay.
Meg's here, so everyone's here. But we'll have to do roll
Erin's
call
not,
'cause
well, Erin's not here.
Yep. Meg's on time.
Bruce,
Yeah.
Meg,
Yes.
Gino,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Janelle,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Jen,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Clerk, yes, Vice Chair,
You, Colby.
Yes.
Chair,
Yes,
unanimously.
very good. Thank you, everybody. All right, so moving on to item number 2 in our subcommittee reports. Ken, actually, I'll go to you first tonight on housing and economic development.
I don't know if this is the time to do it, but I handed out some
Yep.
draft goals that we've got for housing and also some draft goals for economic development.
Perfect. We have
And, I'm sorry?
We have one.
Yep. And I think there might be a copy available if you can screen share if you'd like. But we have been going back and forth, and we looked at the kinds of things based upon what we've been seeing in the key issues and opportunities report, also from some of the citizen background. And these are the items that seem to come up most often, and what we want to do is to try and put a little bit in there. I know we're going to be talking about overlap and some of those other things. I think I'd add one more thing prior to just opening it for any discussion. In terms of metrics for these, and that's one of those things that has to happen at some point, and maybe this is just overall metrics for the report anyway, but we are looking at those other themes that tend to come up from from the report and also from citizen feedback, and that's encouraging affordability in Franklin, improving quality of life, increasing access to opportunity, inclusive economic growth, preparing for climate change, and open spaces and access and investment in open spaces, art, culture, transportation, and infrastructure. They certainly hit here on economic development and housing. In fact, there's plenty of overlap in those two, and of course, there are overlaps in a number of the other committees. So, any questions?
No.
And Kobe, are you able to share your map and talk a little bit about what we were also speaking about too?
Yeah, we're gonna do that during the third part.
Okay,
under
great.
discussion between subcommittees.
Oh, okay, great.
So this first part, or I should say second part, subcommittee reports, is really just looking to get an update on where the subcommittees are, if they have any further meetings that are necessary, and any other agenda type items in regards to the
We will have some more meetings.
Okay.
We've got to hone this in a little bit more, but we'll do that.
Okay, do you have a planned potential date and time for the next
Not
meeting?
yet.
Okay, as soon as you have that, can you let Amy
We will do that.
know, and we'll get that on the agenda.
Mhm.
Excellent. Janelle, from Land Use Zoning and
Yes. All right.
just an update from the site.
An update is our next meeting is planned for Monday, the 13th. Amongst our members, that date works, and I know I need to get you an agenda right away. And the last meeting we had, we actually did a couple, like, think outside the box exercises in our group, where we sort of redrew the zoning map to try to think like, okay, what does this look like in 10 years? And then let's work backwards from that. And we looked at our draft goals and objectives and made a matrix with all of our zones. So we know, is this even relevant? Is this gonna be a, sort of like the achievable piece of it? Does it touch every zone? Does it only touch one zone? Is it really, how important is it? That kind of thing. And so that sort of helped us refine our draft goals and objectives. And I say that work is in progress, so we want to finish that on Monday.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Everyone's gonna be able to make that, right? On land use and zoning? Cool.
I would say I would be aiming for maybe fully remote, because the last few times we met, we've been locked out, and there wasn't an owl even when we got in, and it was like, we've had some challenges.
The owl's gone missing?
I think it's back. It was
It was
back
back.
last week, yeah.
It was back last night too.
Okay.
It says, please return to.
Yeah.
Locked out was an issue last night.
Yeah.
So-
Brian, what can we do about that? I did have to call Amy Frigolito because Janelle texted me and they had to do it from remote. Is there any way that we can either give
I can-
facilities a heads up that we're having these meetings? So that we don't end up them getting to the door and being locked out and they're really under a tight schedule themselves?
No, I know. You would think, I mean, it
It's
is
supposed to
on,
check the
it is on the calendar, so.
Yes.
Yes.
It,
That-
you know,
that's what it's
that's
supposed to.
number one, that they should be aware that certain nights there will be people in there. If they're unposted meetings, it's a different story, but
Right.
you're doing your job and you're posting things, then. All right, we'll
Yeah.
check them anyway, but
All
I,
right.
I'll reach out to them.
Yeah, just put the bug in their ear. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Perfect. Thank you, Janelle. Gino, sustainability?
We had a great meeting last week with Brika Lai, and we're excited to hear about some of the things that's in sync with us that she already has planned going on, so that's great. We do have a draft set of goals and objectives. We're still also working to refine it, but we're pretty far along now, so we're in good shape. We don't have another meeting scheduled
Okay.
at this point.
So you don't have anything, but you are planning to have
Absolutely.
maybe one or two? How many more do you think?
Oh, at least one or two more, probably
Okay.
more than that.
Okay. Sounds good. I'll write that down. Perfect. Meg, open space, recreation, natural, cultural, historical resources.
Yeah, we have not had the opportunity to meet since the last meeting due to my capacity of my schedule, but we are scheduled in for next Tuesday, 7 p.m. virtually. So we'll have more of an update then.
I'm glad you're feeling better.
Thank you. My kids have also been sick, so it's been a,
That's rough.
light.
It's always tough when the kids get sick, especially when you're not feeling good yourself, but,
Exactly.
I'm glad you're back up and,
Thank you.
functioning. That's good. Okay, Kobe, community services for facilities and circulation.
Yeah, CSFC met last night for an hour and a half through multiple laptops dying. We made it through. Very strong meeting. I think we talked through our goals and objectives, but now I intend to sort of draft them to bring them back to the group to really start honing in on language. But we certainly advanced our understanding as a group of where we're starting to lie in all the pieces. I don't have the next one scheduled yet, although do we still have a meeting next Wednesday? So for now, I would say, just so I can say it first, that going back to the time slot right before this, so that'd be the 5:15.
So that's actually gonna be All right, so 5:15. 5:15 on the 15th?
5:15 on the 5th.
Very good. 15th. Very
5,
good.
5:15 on 5:15?
5:15 and 5:15, that works
Mhm.
great. Excellent.
Can't forget.
No, can't forget. Anything else from the chairs of the subcommittees in regards to just a general report? No? All right. Moving on to agenda item number 3, subcommittees. This is a discussion on basically cross-element questions that we have, goals between the goals and objectives for the various subcommittees. Amy, I think I'm going to throw this over to you to start this off.
Sure, so, I mean, I received, from the Housing and Economic Development Subcommittee today, they've provided a whole, list of their, goals for each of their components. I believe that, Janelle also sent something over earlier with her goals. I don't know, I've been in the drive and I looked around the drive. I think our whole point now is to combine, or be my job to take everything and combine it, and look at if there is anything repetitive, to pull the repetitiveness out. And then after we do that, it would be to start narrowing it down if there are too many for each of them, to what is realistic that can be accomplished, for the committee. So, that's kind of where I'm at. I think after tonight's meeting, I was kind of holding out to see comments from tonight's meeting, and then I'm gonna put together one full spreadsheet that'll be on the drive for everyone to work on. So Ken, I know that you mentioned putting it in, I'm gonna
I
put
haven't had a
everything.
chance to put it in.
That's okay, I'm gonna put everything into one full spreadsheet, so
Okay.
we'll break it out by element.
Mm-hmm.
Would that
Um,
format work for you?
Yes, yes, that's fine. I'll break it out by element, and then, if there's any questions, I'll probably at the bottom put any questionable stuff that maybe I don't know where they wanna go with it, or it's overlapping, so that's kind of the plan for the next step.
Okay, very good. Just so everyone knows, have everyone be made aware of what currently exists. Meg, thank you so much for putting the spreadsheet together. What you're looking at behind me here is actually the natural, cultural, and historical resources, goals and objectives that we've been working through. Meg was nice enough to put this together for all of us here in the various committees to fill in their goals and objectives directly into this spreadsheet. So however each subcommittee might be collecting or at least documenting their goals and objectives, the ultimate goal is to take those goals and objectives and to put them into one spreadsheet on the drive for us to accumulate that information and actually to keep it into one general format. So this is for all intents and purposes is the general format right here. And nicely done, by the way, Meg. If you notice on this particular spreadsheet, there are various tabs. There's circulation, there's community services and facilities, there's economic development, there's land use, there's natural, cultural, historical resources, etc., and then there's open space, recreation, and sustainability. So ultimately, what each chair in each subcommittee is going to be responsible for is transposing those goals and objectives into this. Go ahead.
Yes, through the chair. I know that, land use did this, taken off the previous master plan, update plan, where we had a few more columns where we're trying to assign, departments
Yes.
and roles and responsibilities. So
Yes.
this is an awesome spreadsheet as well. So we kind of need to incorporate both, I think.
Okay.
To get them both on there. I know that Janelle you had your spreadsheet going where, and we could, like I said, I mean, I can do it where I like to combine them
Yes.
and put it out to the committee.
Yep.
Send an email, say this is all combined.
Yep.
And even if you aren't able to fill in every column, it's okay. That's stuff that we're gonna work towards in the future. Like if you don't know who's assigned to what task or what department or committee, it's fine. Mainly, we're just looking for the goals, and then we can work towards the assignments.
Because ultimately, the goal
And-
with that is to, as when we get to the implementation portion of those specific
Yes.
goals, is to ultimately see who and what department are gonna be responsible to meet those goals and objectives.
Right.
That's going to be our
Right,
implementation
right.
portion. as
Which
get
we can
past
do
this.
after we establish everything.
Right.
because-
Kobe?
Yeah, that was essentially my point. It's easy to add columns.
Mhm.
If we want to throw the columns there now, great. But the goals and objectives are going to be difficult enough to get to for now, and then we can once we agree on those, we can have a conversation about who they're assigned to and all that.
Now, Kobe, you and I had a discussion earlier about some items you'd like to talk about first. Would you like to bring that now?
Yeah, I'm going to share. So, trying to figure out how to take all the different thoughts that we've had and start to put them into a collective vision, which is really what this group as a collective is trying to do. And so, I had fun with my little art project, putting them into a single map, and I presented this yesterday, and I think that they found it valuable to even just look at as a starting place for. Yeah, and if I could share my screen, then I can manipulate it.
I have it right here.
Yeah, it would just make it hard for me to
Oh.
manipulate in live time as I
Yeah.
talk through it. That was my only thought.
Sure, you wanna present?
If that's all right.
Let me put that on Zoom.
Can I just ask a quick clarifying question? Who did you present to yesterday?
I'm on the Housing and Economic Development Group and the Community Services Facilities. and
Oh, so I
Circulation.
missed it because I was remote.
Yes.
Okay, got
Yes,
it.
yes, yes.
All right.
Okay.
Um,
I'm gonna make you.
I wanted, so it was talked through, and some of these things are conversations that have come out of both of those groups. Thank you. But take this as reflective of my draft, throwing things at a wall thoughts, and not as reflective of my committee members or even my final thoughts. And I hope that this is a somewhat useful exercise. Okay, so some of the key priorities, just starting there, people want high quality of life. These are things that we're hearing from the public. High quality of life, lower traffic, this is in no particular order, lower traffic, less radical neighborhood changes, incremental, sustainable growth, low cost projects, high returns on projects, affordable and accessible housing, so people at different incomes at different stages of life can still find living in Franklin. Still a focus on conserving as much as we can our natural and historic resources. One of the key themes that I think is going to be coming up and that I'm hoping that this starts to present is the concept of connected neighborhoods. How do we connect different neighborhoods and think of ourselves as neighborhoods? Destination worthy locales. How do we make Franklin worthy of being a place that you visit on a weekend? Improved walk and bikeability, we keep hearing about reliable transit, added revenue for the town. A lot of that is why we need incremental sustainable growth. Again, related, healthy town finances, and certainly working toward decarbonization. Again, these are not going to be in particular order, but talking through a few different things. So in blue, you have facilities, your municipal facilities. Right now, this is taking, which is not finalized by any means, but just for the sake of talking through, taking one of the proposed school facilities ideas, which if you haven't been following, is the idea of a North Elementary School campus where Keller Sullivan currently is, a South Elementary School campus where Remington and Jefferson currently is, a combined middle school centrally located next to our high school, and the possible reuse of Kennedy as the new home for our EDC. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Is there any way to turn off that front row of lights so that we can see the screen
Unfortunately,
a bit
no.
more
But I
clearly?
can.
Okay.
We could do all of them, maybe.
Yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
that's
that's
better.
not,
That's better.
Just even that's better, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry about that. Okay.
Oh, that's good.
Look at that.
just don't wanna make it too dark.
no, this is good.
Oh,
that's good.
better,
Chris,
thank
can you
you.
see okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm showing it through Zoom.
Okay.
Related to that, again, it's not an agreed upon, but certainly leaning toward the reuse of Parmenter as the new location of a police station. The only additive Facilities that we really hear about are a few, and I'm just putting some out there, but these have not been agreed upon by the facilities committee. One is a north fire station, currently putting it at like the American Legion Elks type land, who is a possible location. An arts and culture facility, currently proposing that as the reuse of the police, and the addition of a composting at our transfer station. Everything else, fire, library, are for recreation, all staying where they are. Town hall staying where they are. I'll just go in order of these, but the real concept, is how do we continue to grow without further damaging our natural resources, without radically changing neighborhoods, and without really adding a lot to our traffic. So the general thought is, how do we start to think about, and this is coming out of our housing and economic development conversations, how do we start to think about the town as neighborhoods that can be built upon, so that almost everywhere else can really expect little to no change. If we can focus around key places, then we can also focus our walkability and infrastructure investments in those key places. And so what you're seeing in yellow is the concept of neighborhoods as places, and sort of using the schools as a central location. Neighborhoods meaning places with slightly denser zoning than what's currently there, possibly the opportunity for neighborhood businesses, so like a corner store, nothing that's going to meet all your needs, but maybe something that you can walk to and get some of your needs. And a lot of this already exists, right? Well, we used to have a Cole's Tavern in the south. Certainly around here you got Dacey's Market, and around here you have the pizza and 7-Eleven next door to each other. And the only thing around this yellow, this is sort of a longer term, but if Gorelick ever comes up, we've talked about the concept of that's right on top of a transit station, can that be really intentionally made into a village of sorts, where people can live in a really tight, walkable community with access and to where they are. The thought there is then, pretty much everywhere else, and we'll talk about a few other places that we're adding housing, but pretty much everywhere else is a place that we can, strongly discourage the new development. What you're seeing in gray is public and private lands. I tried not to care too much about whether they're publicly owned at this point, although most of these are, but public and private lands that are priority for maintaining conservation in my mind. Okay. We were the Economic Development Committee and started talking about, well, where does it make sense for business to go? This concept is, it makes sense for business, again, a little bit of neighborhood business, but really concentrating your business around where it currently is, which is the 140 corridor, and making sure that we're maximizing the off-highway spaces as high value that don't add to residential impact. You don't have to drive through. It's people jumping on and off the highway. That's value to the broader world. So making sure we're maximizing that, as well as encouraging commercial along our 140 corridor, and then really concentrating on our downtown. Not just for the sake of we love downtowns, but if we really want Franklin to be a destination, you don't go because they have a really nice Stop and Shop plaza. You go because there's a nice walkable Quain New England downtown with a bunch that supports small businesses in a tight area that's worth going to. And so really, that's why we're concentrating with that, and a few reasons. The dark green are the crossing and the sort of expanded, what we think of as the expanded downtown corridor, and really welcoming your dense commercial there, dense mixed use. The larger light green is where we're really upzoning the most density, so allowing for an incremental densification of those general areas. I tried not to tie myself to any current zones, although you could tell that they're loosely based around them. But saying, hey, all right, if we're gonna really sustain a downtown core and we want people that are able to jump on our transit and support this walkable neighborhood, that's the place that we need to welcome the most density. And then pink are the places where it's not quite the green level of density, but it's really where we're prioritizing the welcoming of new housing. And it's hard to see all the colors as they overlap, but it's really your 140 corridor and a little bit off of that in a few different directions. Why is this all important? Because in blue is the circulations committee's proposal to return to a fixed bus route. The biggest way that we can minimize traffic while still adding new people and improve accessibility and life affordability and for people at different ages is to offer housing near a reliable transit option. And so if we return, as we used to have, a bus along 140 and in and around our downtown, then we know that that's the place where we can welcome a little bit denser housing to support that. I started to get a little bit into the parking conversation, which I know needs to be part of this, but really putting a priority. We talked about looking at underutilized spaces, really placing a priority on more efficient use of existing parking spaces with a few slight additions of parking lots where I think that they can be dotted in. But really, really concentrating, underused parking lots, whether they're publicly owned or privately owned or not, underutilization of parking lots is a matter of policy. And I think we need to understand that before we say, well, it's a privately owned parking lot, we have to now build a parking lot next door because they can never. No, we get to work with landowners to make sure that we're maximizing the sharing of parking, particularly in our downtown, because that immediately gets thrown away, the walkability gets thrown away if you're tearing things down to replace them with parking. That's the bulk of what I started to lay out here. I had a little fun with myself adding the pink, which is my attempt at Franklin Greenway, which connects a lot of our existing pathways and public spaces that takes you all the way through Franklin, which is a fun exercise for me. Oh, the only other one I didn't talk about is industrial. Purple is industrial, and really concentrating, as we already do, around off-highway and near the highways and along Grove Street, and really allowing those to be these truck corridors, big business type corridors, so that they're not going into our residential neighborhoods and impacting everything else. Again, a lot of this you'll say, we're already doing all of this. Yes, but it's important, I think, to think about it in that way. Brown are a few of the priority intersections that we've identified for improvement, and really treating those intersections, making them roundabouts where possible, and treating them as gateways into Franklin. So you got your Washington King down there, major priority on Chestnut 140, a little bit on Beaver 140, and certainly Pleasant and Chestnut coming in from Norfolk. Okay, I think I talked about everything. I hope that we take this not as an intimidating thing, but rather as maybe a helpful starting place for talking about cross, especially as we talk about land use and zoning, which is about hardening these.
You're next.
Everything I just said, those are not policies, right? There are going to be many underlying policies where we might still disagree on how we create that vision. So this is taking a big step back, looking at a vision as a whole, and then we can talk about sort of underneath, well, how would we make such a vision come true? Okay, I think those are my thoughts. You have a light orange possible long-term fixed bus route in there too, but I made it very light.
Have you touched base with GATRA on all these ideas, or
I'm in touch with GATRA.
What's the goal for whom would we be reaching out to secure a regular bus route that be Gatra?
That would be Gatra, yeah. Gatra had a regular bus route up and down 140 until the pandemic. This would be about returning that. That's a little easier service to return. We just got all the data back from Gatra on, Gatra's currently been on demand for the past 4 or 5 years. We got all the data back, worked with our GIS department, and looked at that. And what you see is, yeah, most of your trips are just going up and down 140. The few exceptions being Dean sports games to the athletic field and the hotel that's currently housing the migrants.
I don't mean to stay on subject for a second, but would such a route include, is the thought process to have specific bus stops or specific bus locations to stop? In other words, it would be at like Stop and Shop, it would be at Shaw's, or would there actually be like bus stop locations along the way where people could wait for a bus?
If you're asking for my proposal, consistent bus stops is a much preferred space. We know the key destinations, they're the major commercial lots and some of the key housing things. B, it allows us to create shelters that let people, weather the weather, in a more reliable way. The main reasons why people don't use transit is that it's unreliable or that it's too difficult to use. If we can get those, people will be willing to walk a little more or even wait the 15, 20 minutes that it takes to come if they know that a bus is going to be there and they can be sheltered from the sun and storms.
Very good. Anyone have any comments or points you want to make in regards to this? Now, Janelle, I was going to actually give you your own little allotted amount of time, in part as the chair of land use and zoning, to actually ask, because I know your particular group has quite a few questions in regards to circulation and transportation and other aspects, parks, etc. So I know I was actually going to allow you to lead off this discussion on asking or forwarding any kind of questions you might have. So I'll pass it off to you.
Lucky you.
Well, so first comment on this. Kobe, did you know we were playing with maps in our subcommittee?
No, but I figured you must.
Yeah.
I was just jealous that you were on that subcommittee.
I think this is why we, in our subcommittee, we've been antsy about hearing the draft goals and objectives from the other groups.
Yes.
Not just because we want to put them all on the list and see if there's duplicates, but they inform each other, right? Particularly things like objectives that are coming out of the other subcommittees inform what we're recommending for land use, because the land use recommendations can sort of create the foundation for all these other goals.
Yes.
Right? And it's
specifically housing and even transportation.
and we kept running into things like, okay, well we're thinking about the Gorelick site, the area around Forge Park train station, and is it a risk to recommend adjusting that zone? Are we limiting ourselves in future industrial, or is there a housing village potential there? We were talking that through, not knowing what the Housing and Economic Development Subcommittee is talking about. Even you flashed up Meg's start,
Yes.
and it talks about artist housing as a goal for that subcommittee. Well, we've been talking about, do we make a recommendation to add housing to the Mixed Business Innovation District, right? So just knowing that that's a goal from that group, an objective that helps inform the others. So there's so much overlap, but I think that by sort of living in this messy overlap time and talking through what everybody else has and sort of throwing everything onto a map or onto a whiteboard or onto a wall, or that will make this a really great, robust master plan, right? And we can get some tangible things out of it. One of the other examples we had was, like EV charging, right? We started thinking about what are the provisions in the bylaws for gas stations? Are we thinking about EV charging, and what are the goals the other committees have for that?
Right.
So these are just some of the areas that we felt we have our own thoughts about it, but we were sort of tripping on, because we wanted to talk it through with the big group. What does the other subcommittees feel about the SNET extension, and how are we responding to that? Are we just assuming it's a done deal? Are we, that's something that's touching everything.
If you would like, we can, since you have the floor, we can actually take these questions right now.
Yeah, let's start talking
Yeah.
about it. Let's
And
get into it.
just start,
Well,
we can start
right.
building these questions right now. That's,
So at the
so
last
if you
meeting,
like,
there's,
take a specific question and feel free to address it to the subcommittee you think that's relevant to it. And this is our opportunity to actually start kind of answering those questions and start filling in those gaps, especially like EV, for instance.
okay.
So whichever you feel is your priority question, you can take the lead on getting these cross-content questions out there. So, since because I have a sneaky suspicion that many of the questions that you have are similar questions to what the other subcommittees
What everybody
have,
has.
and we might be able to actually
Well,
kill two birds at one stone.
I'll ask a question for everybody.
Go
So
right
there
ahead.
was a list that was put together at the last meeting
Yeah.
that I couldn't be at, but I read the minutes.
Yeah,
And that seemed like a good
it's
starting point.
this
like
list
if-
right here.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So maybe as a group, we all just work through that.
Mhm.
And then in my email earlier, I had a couple things, I don't know if they made it onto this list. Oh, yeah, historic district, form-based codes and character.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay, go.
My only fear with working through them, just topic by topic, which eventually we need to, and we still can, is that, if we just talk about parking and make some decisions there, then that might change. Like having some sense of, I don't know, starting point for, and that's why I thought, going into this after some reaction to an overall thought of interconnected neighborhoods with, planned business and industrial. If we can have some open conversation on that, then we can start to talk about how these fit into that, was my thought.
Eric?
Interconnected neighborhoods, that's coming up in our conversations on sustainability as well. Some of the ideas and topics that have come up is including when we've had dialogue with some citizens in town is how to get from those neighborhoods. Like some people are highlighting that they gotta go all the way down to downtown in order to get back up. And isn't there some sort of way that we could have some sort of alternative transportation network to get across to some of those neighborhoods as well? We've talked a lot about walkability and increasing walkability. These concepts you have about having village centers and having, convenience stores in these certain areas to get people to walk to those areas. I know my kids would love to not go to 7-Eleven. I'd like them to not ride their bikes to 7-Eleven where we live because it's dangerous. And to have these little areas where they could go and meet up with their friends to get their ice cream, would be really great. I think there's questions about how much you can dictate what that development is, from a zoning perspective. You can't say, oh, I want a small mom and pop shop that's gonna open up, a convenience store as opposed to a CVS, and so I think you're gonna need to get creative on how you get the type of commercial use within the area that you're looking for, but I think that's really key. The other and just building off of that connectivity between the neighborhoods, there's been a lot of conversations about SNET, and Janelle, you're bringing about SNET as well, and we see a lot of benefits towards that extension as well, and things are sounding good, and it's progressing, it sounds like. But the key thing too is how do we get to SNET? Everybody's driving to get to SNET. They're using it as recreation, and what we've heard a lot about is how people want to have bike paths that are separate from the roads, that there's some sort of deviation in the middle to keep people safe. Because people, if you just create a bike lane going down Washington, it's still a dangerous road to be biking down if you don't have that protection. And so I think from a land use perspective, how we can start to think about utilizing SNET not just as a recreation trail, but as a commuter, as a is a way to get from point A to B without car transit and improving that network. And so I think of it as all these arterial kind of networks coming from these neighborhoods and how it could interconnect. That's where, those are some of the thoughts that comes to mind when you talk about network and neighborhoods.
Go ahead, I do want to now to have the opportunity to
Yeah,
finish
yeah.
what she was.
Hey Glenn, I'm gonna turn these lights back on.
Yes, thank you, Chris.
Just a super quick thought. The one thing that I didn't mention, as you might expect, was walkable, walk-bike priorities around arterial roads, which is in green on I think that's key.
Janelle, did you want to start off asking some of the questions that you had on your list? Try to get some of the things specific to your land use and zoning committee? Because actually what I think is going to happen here is one or two of the questions that you have is probably going to spawn a similar question from the other subcommittees that we may be able to clear up tonight. Just to try to get the ball rolling on what we need to accomplish.
Well, I think the general question we've
Yep.
been running into is, what are the other subcommittees' goals and objectives, right? What are they talking about related to these overarching topics? That's for all of those topics on that list, because that provides important nuance to what we're recommending in our group. So it's almost like we heard quite a bit of community feedback on land use and zoning, and some of those things that we heard were related to, people don't really know what land use and zoning is, so it kind of touched everything else. And I think our work is so connected, like, it can't be so siloed. So yes, I can go through these specific things. Okay,
Pick one.
I'll pick one. One of the things we were talking about is sort of defining mixed use. Do we make a recommendation to, we're reducing the parking requirements or eliminating in certain zones, requiring ground floor retail along certain streets with housing above. This sort of gets at density, housing, economic development, circulation, and if you're reducing the parking, we are assuming public transit. So it sort of touches all these things. Is this recommendation feasible based on what the other subcommittees are thinking? There's one example of something that we talked through on our group that we were prepared to put forward, but we just wanted to have this kind of thing talked about with everybody.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you, through the chair. Janelle, it's a great question. We, in the EDC, we have actually talked about defining mixed use. We have and reducing parking minimum requirements so that we could become compliant with the MBTA Communities Act, but also just to kind of show what Councilor Frangillo has talked about, what you're talking about now. I think we all have the same goals. It feels like when we sit and talk about what we really want to see and what we think is important. But I think it would be great if you saw that if you could see that bylaw amendment change, and maybe it fits into what you already were talking about.
Can I ask what the general consensus is on the recommendation for parking? Is it taking it down to 0 still, or is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so it's to remove the requirements
Yep.
for commercial and for residential. For commercial, for the commercial parking requirements to be 0, that would make us compliant with the MBTA community bylaw, law. And we added on to it to push a little bit to remove residential requirements as well, to get people to talk about things like this again, and how important it is to actually think about what it means if we make sure people have to have parking in these weird shaped size lots and how they can't fit them. So what happens then?
Just in the core downtown.
Just in downtown commercial. That's what we're talking about now.
Just C1.
Downtown commercial.
Downtown
Didn't-
commercial.
Yeah.
Could I question you on that?
Yeah.
Because I kind of read it, it seemed a little confusing, and I'd like to correct me if I'm wrong. I read it as if someone was to build commercial residential above,
Mhm.
there'd be no parking requirement for the commercial. But if someone just built a commercial project, the parking would still comply. That's how I kind of read that. Am I correct, Ryan?
Brian's always-
I think the Economic Development Committee received a proposed bylaws, 3 of them that were in front of them. They recommended changes on one of them. And the one is to where what you just mentioned was the way it was originally intended, the way the bylaws were written. They're recommending changing the parking off-site, off-the-road parking requirements in the downtown commercial to 0 required spaces for commercial and residential now. Okay, so regardless of whether it's 100% commercial or it's a mixed use, there's no requirement of parking in downtown district.
Okay, I just read it as a mixed-use commercial residential.
Well, originally, that's the way it was. We were saying if you're gonna have a mixed-use development, the residents the residential units have to have a certain amount of parking spaces, but the commercial is waived. If it's a strictly commercial development, there would still be a requirement for parking on that property. But that's changed now, so that's not the issue.
So a single parcel containing a single commercial entity could build without a parking requirement, if this passes with the council?
If it passes, yes.
Okay, all right, just clarification.
So I think there's a lot of things that we're actually in the process of doing now that sort of fit into what you're saying and what you're trying to do. How we can connect the information for everybody is the key, is the important thing,
Right.
right? So we'll think about it.
Through the chair, just a follow-up to that. So, and you sort of alluded to this, Kobe, but I don't know the conversations that are happening. So is there equally a proposal to have agreements, and I don't know how official the agreements are, but with the private lot owners downtown to act as supplemental or shared parking with whatever goes there at any time of day or night?
Go ahead.
Not currently a proposal. If you're asking my personal opinion, I think it should be something that's considered by the council now, but the general pushback has been, that's something that should be taken up by the master plan.
So I guess it's a question, can we recommend that? And we've talked
Yeah.
about this ad nauseum,
Yeah.
if you don't require parking on a lot that's only trying
Yes,
to
please.
put 3 residents in a commercial, let them park in the parking lot next door overnight that's completely vacant because the business closes at 5 p.m.
Right.
And
Yes.
that's been the hang up
Exactly.
with so much of the area, literally,
Yeah.
square
Yeah.
footage in the downtown.
I think one of the things
Area.
we also, Councilor Frangillo and I have spoken about a lot is what are the tools in our toolbox that we have to be able to encourage this, incentivize people to share parking?
Right.
And one of the things that where we don't wanna, one of the things we have is the stormwater utility fee for impervious coverage. And so I always think we should be able to use that somehow, that if you share your parking, then you get a reduction in your stormwater fee. Like maybe it's 10% or something, but not a huge amount, but a little bit to incentivize parking sharing, right? Through private people can share, and they go, look, we're gonna share, and then they get some kind of reduction. And that's what the municipality could do. I don't know if that would work, but that's one of the things I'm trying to.
Go ahead, Jim, just
say.
as a comment.
Well, Jen was gonna say.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, well, for that, and could the developer pick up, like say, hey, I'm not gonna put parking on my site, but I'll contribute to this stormwater fee, take 15 to 50% off your fee, I'll take that, just so I can get my development through without parking. Instead of the town picking it up, why not the developer pick it up?
Yeah, I love it, that's great.
Well, that's the only way you're gonna get it, because you'd be paying somebody for the park.
Right,
This is
basically,
the
it's like
old
paying
New
for the parking.
This is
Yeah.
old New England, and property rights go
But
deep.
I think that's where this conversation
Yeah.
and this brainstorming is really important.
Totally.
Because we have some really brilliant people, I think, in the room, and that's why we need you to talk about it.
Sorry, Joe.
Just 1 second. Joe, did you have a comment?
Yeah, the stormwater fee is more of an environmental thing, so I don't think that's gonna ever be triggered to give people incentives. It would be a tax incentive, maybe.
It's a cost,
It's a cost.
right? You're
But-
paying
but-
for
but
your,
let me
you're
tell you-
paying for your parking.
Let's
lot.
tell you how the real world works now. You got someone who's plowing and sanding and salting his parking lot. Is not gonna let the guy next door park over there for free. And then,
not.
and then it's only gonna take 1 month, that guy doesn't pay him his monthly rent for the parking lot, and it's dead. It's never gonna work. It sounds good, it's fantasy land to me, because I know if I'm paying a $40,000 a year contract for snow, sand, and salt, and I gotta do the sidewalks that the town has me to do right now, within 24 hours of a snowstorm, and the guy next door is not pulling his weight, he ain't parking in my parking lot. That's never gonna happen. I'm just telling you the real world. It sounds great, it's not gonna work.
Just one.
Like Rockland Trust, would have to go around and collect rent from all the tenants in the town. Who's gonna babysit that? Who's gonna collect the checks? Who's gonna walk around and grab a check every month for maintenance in the parking lot, the cleanup of the sand, the salt, the stormwater fees? It sounds great, it's never gonna work.
Okay, go.
Two main thoughts on that. One, so we have two main strategies when it comes to encouraging shared parking. One is the town leasing or purchasing existing parking lots and being the enforcer in its entirety. That's something that you've seen utilized in other communities, and I think is a real policy that we should consider. The other is if fees or penalties are strong enough, however you want to call them, costs are strong enough on parking, and we make it really, really clear that, you will get encouraged as a new developer to use the existing, your neighbor's parking, their willingness to pay is high, right? If I cannot have to build my own parking on my site because I've come to a financial agreement with my neighbor, that the free market is very, very good about working out what price point that has to be for all parties to be satisfied. I get that it's not zero, of course it's not zero, but surely there's a number where it makes sense for Rockland Trust to say, okay, yeah, we're not using it at night, it's costing us money, I'd rather 5, 10,000, 10, 20,000, a year in income for, someone next door to be able to use that.
Okay, and then you go and you allow products to be built around that, depending on the shared parking.
Yeah.
There's a conflict between the owners now, and where do all those people park now when there's a yellow ribbon around the parking lot? The only idea is gonna happen is if the town takes all the parking uptown by eminent domain, which will never happen, and now share it with the residents and business owners.
There's not enough parking uptown
There's
anyway to do it,
There's
so
not.
they'd have to build a
Right.
parking garage.
Are you gonna suggest that in the master plan?
Oh, yeah,
Take the
sure.
parking by eminent
Oh,
domain?
sure.
Kelly, finish your thought, now I want to go pass it over to Kevin.
Well, I think this is it. I mean, I think that this is like the bulk of one of our conversations, so I don't want to get discouraged. This might actually end up being the hardest conversation that we have
It is.
in its entirety throughout this
That'd be-
whole process we haven't even
that'd be
started.
And you're only talking about the downtown, Kobe, not talking about the rest of the town.
Hold on.
Yeah. Okay, the idea of there's not enough parking spaces is just something, and we knew that this would come up, and I'm slightly frustrated that we weren't able to go out and pay someone. But it doesn't matter because I'd happily bring up tons and tons of photos. Every time I go to the downtown, I take a photo of all the lots. You're at 10%, 15% utilization rate max of hundreds of parking spaces in the downtown. So if we get out of the mindset of just the public versus private spaces, and we treat all spaces as they are, way more parking than ever gets used in our downtown. And if you look at your favorite communities to go to, they did not become your favorite community to go to because they built a ton of parking. They became your favorite community to go to because they built a vibrant place, and you were willing to walk a little bit further or find the parking that was available. I want to have a parking problem. We don't currently have a parking problem, at least in terms of too little parking. We have a problem in terms of communicating where they are and making sure that it's being shared.
That's true, I agree. Ken, my apologies.
No, there's no apology. It's not about parking.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to.
It's not about parking?
No, I would,
Okay.
keep going if that's.
All right.
It's
If
more to
it's-
Janelle's point, and I think the point that Jennifer raised
On-
last week on sort of the broad-based overlap. I wonder if one of the things that we do that could be helpful, I think, to all the committees, certainly would be helpful to mine, is if we had a set of definitions that we agree upon. So take something like mixed use. Here's what we think mixed use means, broad-based, and that way we can make the goals for, say, housing and economic development dovetail to that. And that way we give context and we frame for the entire report. I don't know if it's a glossary or whatever you want to call it, but really just sort of this introduction to concepts like mixed use, downtown, neighborhood, preservation, accessibility, affordability, livability. Those are these concepts that are just running wild that need definition, practical definitions.
Brian, we already have these I'm pretty sure we already have these definitions.
Well, if we have them, we can incorporate them to this. That's all I'm saying.
Right. There are, of course, some definitions of what you're saying. We have a mixed-use definition we would like to add to the zoning bylaw, which is going forward right now, I hope, to the town council as part of this other issue we were just discussing. Because we were trying to split the residential use, non-residential use parking in the downtown, but now that they're both going forward without any requirement for each, we're still going forward with the mixed-use definition anyway. And it's basically two different uses together on the same lot. It could be residential and non-residential, or it could be two non-residential uses, whatever the case may be.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
I mean, if I can encourage us to do this, I mean, I thought we're trying to meet the future. And I don't think if we stay stuck in these legal definitions, these bylaw definitions, I mean, what's the point if we're going to do that? I think we've got to stretch ourselves and say, take that vision that we saw on that map and anything else. Here is, isn't the point of this to push us towards the future? And right now, the things that we have as bylaws, the things that we might have as law, and I'm going to even say Massachusetts law, just may be out of step for 10 years from now. And maybe we should define and talk about what we mean and what we want as a part of it. Residents of this town don't care about what that bylaw says. They know what they want for their convenience. They know what they want for their safety. They know what they want for livability. That's why I say these concepts. Mixed use is as much a concept as it is a zoning requirement. And we've got to make sure that we can define some of these things so that real goals can dovetail to this, as opposed to us dovetailing to a current bylaw. So I'd encourage us to think a little bigger.
Brian.
And as someone who's engaged in the law, I'm going to tell you all the time, we're not always right. and we're certainly not forward-thinking. Lawyers are not forward-thinking people.
Meg? Hold on, bro.
I'm just gonna quickly go back to the parking conversation.
Okay,
and-
one
Yep.
second, did you want to finish?
As far as just mixed use as an example, yes. What is mixed use? As far as your community and you're doing visiting, that's good. And we're dealing with bylaws. You have to write it up in a certain way that works for the bylaw that you have. So yes, exactly what you're saying. I mean, sustainability and all the other issues that you're dealing with right now are looked at it in different ways, depending on whether you're writing a regulation or whatever the case, So understood. As far as As far as the shared parking issue, I think the issue right now is to write a goal of try to attain shared parking in the downtown. Get that in as a goal, and then you can figure out from there what your objectives are and the actual specific actions related to it. And if you don't reach that goal in the next 5 years or 10 years, you're back to it again, but you need to work on it and in a systematic way. We've talked about it so many times, and there are a lot of issues with it. The planning board says, okay, you can have a certain kind of development in a certain location, but you need to have parking, and your next door neighbor says, well, you can do it here, but then the next door neighbor sells their property a year later, and before you know it, you have to have all those things worked out, and how is it gonna be established and everything. And it's been done in other communities, so fine, we should just do the study, look at it, but I recommend just making it a goal to attempt to do that, and go from there.
And ultimately, so that's gonna go to land use and zoning, that's gonna ultimately end up, or should end up, as an attainable goal as far as zoning is concerned, because that's gonna be ultimately what's gonna affect the parking conditions is whatever zone this type of parking is
Right, but,
incorporated.
correct, and it's also economic development and all the other issues too, so.
Right, so.
That overlap is
So
very
this,
important.
this sounds like, so in other words, it sounds like a general goal across the board that would affect most, if not all, of the various content areas. Hold on 1 second, I just wanna give Meg a chance to chime in. Go ahead.
Just a quick comment,
Yeah.
going back to the stormwater utility fee and plans on whether you give a reduction for that going forward. We had a deep dive on a project for Conservation Commission on what that sort of looks like and the rationale behind the stormwater utility fee, and I learned a lot about it. But Franklin has one of the highest in the state phosphorus levels, which is why we have so much of a requirement and a fee that is going back to the EPA. So as a town, we owe the EPA over the next 5 years $30.5 million, and the stormwater utility fee is only a fraction of that that we're able to pay back for them. So there's a plan working towards that, but I don't feel like reducing that stormwater utility fee is the right move if we're going to be trying to meet that incredible goal for phosphorus removal, which is based on our land use and phosphorus levels in our water supply. So. I would encourage sharing of said stormwater utility fee rather than reduction of it.
Amy, going to make a comment about that?
Not so much about that. I just think these are great conversations. I think we're getting a little too deep into what our master plan goals and objectives are, and that was kind of the point of the meeting tonight, to really stay more on top of stuff. I mean, we're not gonna solve the stormwater fee.
Right.
And we're not gonna solve who pays for it or whatever. So I think trying, like, with time allowance and the list is to stay a little bit more above on the goals. One of the things Janelle mentioned was, and Kobe had it on his map too, is like Goralick Farms. And believe me, if you don't think all staff talks about that, we do. And a great goal is you may not have a goal determining every single zone and every single piece of the parcel what to be done, but there does need to be a master plan for that parcel itself, and that's definitely like a goal that can be included. So I'm just trying to think to get a little bit on the broader spectrum, and I know that I think a lot of this conversation, once we combine all the goals from all the subcommittees, you guys are all gonna see what everybody's thinking about and know what everybody's thinking about, because I know we're all sitting here going, well, what's this other subcommittee talking about, what's this subcommittee talking about, and being able to combine all that, which I hope to have as soon as I get them all. With the shared document, and those subcommittees can really take that information and analyze it, and then put together like specific questions on what they're concerned about or where they may overlap. So I just don't wanna spend too much time getting down to, one thing.
But
Kobe? Hold on 1 second.
Just want to answer, so Ken put a question forward, so for sake of moving things forward. If you want a definition of mixed use that I think we can all utilize, I would put forward mixed use development refers to the coexistence of residential and retail on a single parcel. Mixed use neighborhoods refers to the coexistence of residential and retail within an area, so on different parcels, but within an area. And I think restricting it, in this case, to residential and retail is intentional, that we're not hearing people talk too much about mixed-use industrial.
I wonder if we can figure out those things that need the definitions, maybe parcel that out to us, have us workshop this a little bit. That way you can come in, have something we can look at, and, in the same way that we first started these meetings looking at the overriding goals. But if we could figure out those things that need more of a definition, put them down in some location where we could all see them and talk about them.
Well, this behind my head is mass law definitions for all various things from affordable housing to developmental land area.
Yeah,
but those aren't
customized
customized zoning bylaws, yeah.
Multi-family
We need to
housing.
customize towards Franklin.
Yeah.
It's the base.
Mix of residential
Sure.
uses and non-residential uses. That's
Yeah.
the standard.
I mean, these could be some starting points.
Jen, you had a question? Because we do have to get this moving along. I had a sneaky suspicion, and you're right. We
But-
need to kind of get whatever questions we need answered tonight, and I think that's a great idea to put everything into the spreadsheet and let everybody review them. Don't forget, we're gonna be doing this again next week, so, good.
Sure, I don't disagree, but at the same time, I think it's really productive for us to all talk about some of these really important issues that are, every subcommittee has had thoughts on, and our town staff has had really great thoughts on.
That's why we're doing this.
I mean, just from this conversation tonight, what I'm hearing, and anyone correct me if I'm wrong, but from every subcommittee is that as a goal, we'd like to achieve shared parking downtown. And the objective, the reason why, is that there isn't necessarily a limiting factor to development that currently exists right now, or so that some of those limiting factors can be taken off to allow for more development and growth downtown, from business and housing, a mix of housing standpoint, right?
Yep.
Everyone else can figure out how that's gonna happen, but as a goal of the master plan, it sounds like everyone's on the same page. And that helps at least our subcommittee, and
Yep.
Janelle, others chime in, be able to write down that goal or have that in our minds as we think about what the downtown zoning area is. The reason we asked about mixed use is not to define it tonight, but to define the bylaw, but for us, there are really important implications of, well, what is the intent of how much commercial within mixed use? What is the frontage percentage required on the street front that is dedicated to commercial? Not necessarily how big it is, but what is the pedestrian experience around it, right? Like, there are a lot of sort of bylaw updates or things that need to be written related to that to achieve the experience that people probably have in their head. So what we have started doing, to somebody's point, is we have a list of terms that aren't currently defined in our bylaws that we can share or already exist in a spreadsheet that we would love for people to add to. That's all, thanks.
No, it's good. It's a fair point. Back to you, Janelle. Yes.
So, a question through the chair to town council members and our town staff. Are there other items, sort of either on this list or on a potential definitional list that we've sort of talked about, that are already in the works? Because we have a draft objective of define mixed use. And if you're already doing it, that would be great to know, and then we can talk about, is this what we want for the next 10 years? Or are we gonna keep changing it? So are there other things on this list already in the works that maybe we all don't know about?
Well, as of this minute now, we're looking at a potential zoning change in the near future that economic development related, but it's not in front of anybody at the moment. So, but other than that, we're not really, we are for the most part waiting for the master plan recommendations and the goals be set and then go forward. Although there are the studies that have been done already that from MAPC and and things of that nature where, you know, we, like the mixed use definition, right? That is something that we put in there. When we had the MBTA communities issue, we also included the mixed use as something to attain at that time. But those are things that we were told to do anyway as part of our goals for the year to get done, so. But, and if they didn't get done, they would get done, obviously. It would be a master plan goal, and it would get addressed in the future, one way or the other.
Right. I mean, it's mainly to get us to meet the MBTA community, because we have till December. And typically, it takes about 3 months to get through a zoning change, and, but definitely, as Brian said, we're really waiting on anything else to come from the master plan committee. But that was really to meet our 3A MBTA requirements.
Got it.
There are, if you don't mind, we talked about Grolic Farms in that section. I've been wanting to do a combined Bellingham-Franklin study of that area of the world, essentially, now for a long time, and it never becomes a priority. So if you were to address that in the master plan, you get it in there as a goal, or it's a objective, part of another goal, whatever the case may be, then we're much more likely that that type of thing will get done, so.
And that's kind of a crossroad between land use and zoning and economic development, because we're really talking about what we could either overlay that area with or rezone it to.
Right.
With the
Correct.
goal of having some type of economic objective.
Correct. Yeah.
Could be housing, not necessarily, because that's our industrial zone.
Well, it could be. I
over
mean,
there.
it depends. I mean,
It's a real,
we have limited industrial land,
Right.
and if that ever gets reused for something, I hope it does stay industrial, because of it,
Me too.
it's job generation and the whole deal,
Right.
right? But it is near the MBTA station, obviously, and therefore, a housing component is definitely an issue to look at.
which kind of goes back to what Janelle was talking about earlier, her thoughts about that area potentially being,
Right.
you know, a village or something that's
Mhm.
around
Sure.
the T.
It is.
Mixed business innovation
Next.
with housing. That has light industrial.
Right.
What did you say, Jen? You were like off the.
Sorry, I was speaking out of turn.
Yeah, so we were
Okay.
talking about, are there certain areas where we might expand this mixed business innovation that could have some light industrial with housing? Like the mill building, right? So there's certain other areas we thought, this feels like the last master plan had really good intentions here. Let's just see what didn't quite take off there and recommend adjustments to that, and maybe there's other areas in Franklin where that could work. So that's one of the objectives. I had, Gorelick, just the area close to the Forge Park train station because of Mass Communities, to explore that area, and I just added to it a Franklin Bellingham planning study, like a joint. Makes sense, that whole corridor there. So these are the things that we've been running into.
Yeah. And they're good questions. Did that help? At least answer one of your questions?
We'll find out Monday night.
Yeah.
Kobe had a remark.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be helpful, and we're gonna name some times where there are conversations or recent conversations that are had or ongoing studies. Well, it's helpful to be aware of them. I would just wanna, as a proud town council member, I would discourage us from caring too much about the current or recent council's discussions. We have two different missions. We're not an implementing body here at the master plan. We're setting a 10-year vision. If that is not in lockstep with a current or recent master plan action or council action, don't put too much weight into that.
True. Gina, what else do you have that you? I'd ultimately like to try to get as many of your questions out tonight to try to have this open discussion, as Jen so put it so eloquently. This is our opportunity to kind of have those, hopefully have some of those questions answered tonight. And folks, don't forget, we're going to continue this discussion next week. so we can refine these. One of the things I would like everyone to do is kind of do what Amy asked, is to actually get those goals and into the spreadsheet, so everyone will have an opportunity between now and next week, to kind of review those goals and objectives, so that you can foster questions that are clear and precise for us to address next week.
Do we have a deadline for getting the goals into the spreadsheet? Can we agree?
I think
to
Amy's gonna
Last
say
week.
yes.
Well, it depends. I mean, I'm used to people wanting to see it a couple days before, but I know you guys said you meet Monday night. I mean, it kind of looks like it's going to be probably ready, hopefully Tuesday or Wednesday before the meeting at this point. So, I mean, at least Tuesday, so we can get them. Give me
It's an evolving document.
some of time.
Right.
I mean, I have some of them
Right.
already. So, I mean, I think open space is there. I've got housing, so like I can start all that now.
It doesn't have to be everything.
So, and it doesn't have to
Just-
be perfect.
Right.
Like it's
and
it's
again,
a draft. It's a
Right,
draft.
thank you.
Put
We're
some
ahead of
key issues down.
Yeah.
that
No,
you
we
could- so
have
that-
them.
That way we can
Okay.
talk
We,
about it.
we have
next,
ours.
right?
We just
Yeah.
don't know.
Sure.
We're like, a little bit like,
We want to know what
Same,
everyone else is
same.
talking
just,
about.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right, we have
I
them.
think that's what
we
it
felt
is.
like, are we
Yep.
are we contradicting what anybody else is saying, or are we in lockstep? And
Mhm.
it sounds like we're more in lockstep, but
Mhm.
we just want to make sure.
Yep.
So we can
Right.
throw ours in there and then use
Yeah.
the full list on Monday night.
Sure.
Okay.
Eric's had his hand.
I mean,
up
I
for a
could.
long time.
Yeah, he has. I apologize, Eric.
That's all right.
Speak up.
Well, I don't want to interrupt people, and there's a lot of good
Go ahead,
input
Eric.
coming in from Janelle, and so I don't want to overstep.
Yeah, go ahead.
A few thoughts, though, building off of what Ken was saying, and a little bit with what you were saying as well, Glenn. I think we need to be bold on these goals. I don't think we should be looking at, we'll try to do this, we'll try to do that. I think it needs to be definitive, measurable, whether we do it or we don't. But just as we're working on drafting all that, be bold, be very specific on what you're looking for, because that's just going to be so much easier when 5 years from now someone's looking back and trying to figure out what it is that we're trying to achieve, and whether it's, I don't want easy tick marks. Yeah, like I don't want easy tick marks. I want like difficult ones that we're going to have to grapple with. And I like the idea of it going back out to the committees to think through and what those actions are. And that comes to the second point, which is goals, objectives, actions. There's 3 different groups as we're going through these, and I think we're really focusing on goals and objectives right now. Some actions are coming up, like let's do this plan as far as Franklin and Bellingham, and I can see that as a piece that's going to help to meet some of it. But I think let's try and focus on those goals and objectives, and I think some of those other pieces will come a little bit further. Definitions, intermediate housing. I think that needs to get added to the list, because when I see this and it starts talking about deed restrictions and that's it for intermediate housing, I think it's something a little bit more. I think, what we're looking at is, and it's not affordable housing, and it's not a defined term from Massachusetts government, and so we can define it ourselves what we think intermediate housing is. And so I just add that into the list.
Okay.
Lastly, I do think we need to have a conversation about town character and what sort of codes around that. I think that's dovetailing with so much of what our community is grappling right now with types and sizes of housing, and where is it going to be going, what is this mixed use going to be looking like. And so there's something really concrete that I would see value in getting more input and making sure we're on the same page. We don't need to get specific on what those requirements necessarily be, but at least that there's common agreement to put it in the master plan and then bring it to the planning board and the town council to work on actions. So what do people think about town character, and including that is a goal to have cohesiveness within our neighborhoods?
We have that on our list
Yeah.
Good.
You do.
Good.
of
Good.
something that
Well,
needs to be defined.
Yeah.
Right, and,
Yeah.
and we were like, okay, to go back to generic land use goals, how does town character fit in with land use and development? And we're saying, well, one of our overarching goals that we thought was to create some transparency and streamline the whole permitting process. And then within that, we thought, well, then let's have some better guidelines and definitions and understand when someone's going through this process, when is there going to be a discussion about character and what the review process is around that, right? So that's sort of what we've started drafting up. And is that where town character guidelines live? You know, just a recommendation of having them.
Yeah, and for me, through the chair, if it's all right, because dialogue's good, we need to have dialogue in order to get somewhere. I think it's all about the context within the neighborhood, because what's going to work for the character in the downtown isn't going to work for a Garlic Farms. And I have to say, I get worried when we talk about like a redevelopment of a Garlic Farms without having a conversation what it's going to look like, because too often a mixed-use development will go in there. And I know Mashpee Commons, not to throw them underneath the bus, but you might get them. I'm not the biggest fan of Mashpee Commons. You know, I think it loses its realness and authenticity within that space. And I think having clear guidance on what you want to come out of those mixed-use developments, especially when you have an open canvas, as might be contemplated there, I think is really important. So I think I think we're gonna have to, there's a lot of more conversations that's gonna need to be happen outside of the master plan in order to implement, but I do think as we're having those conversations, thinking about that context within the surrounding community, not necessarily is a wide, all of Franklin community, is gonna be really important.
Jen, just for brevity, let's try to get to some general questions that we might be able to answer tonight. Good.
One of the things that was on the list was decarbonization.
Yes.
And when you were talking about aspirational goals, I would love to see particularly municipally held assets be as sustainable and carbon neutral, net zero, XYZ, because that's going to impact also like the town's operating costs long term and impact on the environment long term. And just wondering if there have been discussions in that group specifically about that.
That's like our first goal.
I know, I think a lot of these questions will get answered once everybody sees the goals, but yeah, I mean, I've seen that it definitely is trying to put on the public facilities being
Especially after
solar.
Monday night. Sorry, we have a school
there's
coming to town that is like.
And there's been two elements of it, not just the municipal facilities and what we can do there, but it's also about the purchase of our electricity and where that's coming from. For example, we have our PPA arrangements set up, but outside of the aggregates, town has the PPA arrangements for the solar farm, but we're not purchasing the RECs. And not purchasing the RECs means your energy isn't clean. And so having little details like that are specific is starting to come up within our dialogue. We've also started to have some conversations about codes, building codes as well, decarbonization, and obviously there's stretch codes that we've done, but expanding it off of there.
Yeah, the reason I ask is just because of the overlap with the requirements of development in town, and wanted to just hear a discussion between groups on the topic, but.
I mean, I guess that's a general question for everybody is, we've talked a bit about decarbonization at the municipal buildings and the facilities subcommittee. Would that live in that section of the master plan with a cross-reference to sustainability? Like, do these things where there is overlap, do they live in each other's sections, or is there just, does anything related to decarbonization, sustainability live in that section, and there's a general note? How do we want to handle overlaps?
Right. In other words, where is it addressed within the master plan? And is it generally addressed? Is it broadly addressed? Or is it specifically addressed in a specific context?
I think that it's funny because I remember a conversation when we just started the process on the sustainability end of things. We said, well, is there going to be an additional element called sustainability, or are you gonna have sustainability in each of the
Right.
components like we did last time?
This is the same.
And I don't know if there was ever a decision on that, but that is a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the time, it was decided that there would be a separate sustainability section, but there could also be elements that are, or goals that are,
Still within.
appear in other sections as well that
Right.
relate to sustainability.
Yeah, and that
And
makes perfect sense.
that's part of, in
and I
my,
think
in
that
our
makes
list
everybody-
of goals and objectives, we do have a set of ones that we think belong in other sections, which I'll add to the spreadsheet.
Excellent.
Ken?
Well, you know, I go back to, I think there just has to be some section in this where you've got a lens or a frame or something like that. And sustainability fits very much into talking about it on the broad sense and how everyone can incorporate that into the respective committees and goals and actions as part of it. But I just think that you gotta put some lenses out there for people to see how to read the entire report. Or a frame or something like that.
Fair enough. Joe?
One last question.
Go ahead.
Who and how would we define the character of the town? Because, I mean, 50, 60 years ago, if we had a master plan committee who wanted to save the character of the town, we'd have an automobile racetrack at Shaw's, there was a horse riding stable up here at Magnolia, there was a piggery down on Lincoln Street, and across the street
I
was
want the
a,
arcade back.
and across the street was a dairy with hospital piles and all cows in the dairy across the street. So if those people back then wanted to maintain the character, that's what we'd have today, and we wouldn't be living the life that we have today. So who says what we have right now is the future character? Are we just gonna stop it and put a hold on everything
Okay.
and say, this is what we have and we wanna maintain what we have?
All right, I have
Oh,
to throw
you
my
wanna
2
think
cents.
forward.
Hold on one second, Amy, I'll get to you in a second. Hold on one second. There is one obvious part of this discussion in the master plan that I think many people are failing to recognize. We are a city, and we're a growing city. We need to start to treat ourselves like a city. We're not a town. We are, if anything, going to continue to grow. That is an inevitability in many ways. And we need to think of it not so much around what is the character of Franklin, because you're right, the character that is Franklin today could just as well be different character 10 years from now, just like it was 10 years ago, just like when I moved here back in 1998. You're right, there was a billiard parlor right across the street, and there was a Chinese restaurant across the street. The overall general character has already started to change. But what is an inevitability is growth. We're gonna grow, and we have to think about this master plan from a big picture, holistic. We have the potential to be a larger city 10 years from now, and so on and so on and so forth. Because we are, for all intents and purposes, in a very unique position to meet the needs of both Boston and Providence, being dead center between those two cities, with two
And
major.
Worcester.
With,
Yeah.
right, sorry, I don't
forget.
mean leave Worcester out. We have two major accesses to 495, we have two major access to the MBTA, and with what the MBTA hopes are for their line is to ultimately build more housing, which is gonna bring us more growth. We have to think big picture. We have to imagine ourselves as a city, in a bigger city than we are now, which means that, and I hate to say the word because it actually makes my skin crawl, are higher densities. And we need to think, how are we gonna meet those higher density goals? How are we going to meet circulation issues to meet those higher densities? How are we gonna meet schools? How are we gonna meet just across the board? We have to start thinking like a city, because that's what we are. We're not the old school town Franklin that Franklin used to be back in the 1950s and 60s. It's gone, and it's not gonna come back. So when it comes to character, we kinda have to think about, well, what could the character be 10, 20, even 30 years from now down the line? And ultimately, what we decide, I'm not gonna say the master plan is a decisive thing that's going to decide what the future's going to be, but it's at least gonna help guide us in the future on where we would like the character to be. What would we like our character to look like? Not what do we want our character to maintain, but more like what do we want the character to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. Ken?
Well, you know, I think what you've done is you've given us context, right? Again, I go back to context. And, you know, just to describe that growth, by the way, I think towns also have to deal with growth as well. Especially when we start to look at things like resiliency, climate change, and also the influence of technology. Those are major sorts of things that we know are a future. And I think that character is just the context. That's really what it is. We know that we're going to have to deal with what the context of populations, jobs, and housing are going to be for the future on a very basic level, given the context of how Franklin has grown over the course of the last master plan.
I agree.
And I think that's character. You know, how are we going, the biggest issues that I think we're gonna have to deal with is how are we gonna deal with technology and how we're gonna deal with climate and climate resiliency as a part of how we move forward. We're gonna be putting all of our money into that, all of our resources into that, because it affects things like where people live, how many of us can live here, what kind of jobs we can have or not have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just a thought.
Just to roll on that. So, as we all know, we're going for an override. We don't have enough money to fix the potholes or mow the lawns. Bike paths, all this stuff takes money. And unless we all come together with a positive attitude of moving forward with growth and thinking positive about new infrastructure and new buildings, we have to get the public educated about that, because right now it's not in my backyard attitude everywhere. And with that, we're gonna be stagnant for a long, long time.
There's a goal.
Through the chair.
Yes.
That's the town council's problem.
Yeah.
Not ours.
I understand, but it all starts
That's a
somewhere.
goal of the land use committee.
That ain't on
Okay,
us, Joe.
so folks, just again, in lieu of time, I wanna spiral this back. Janelle, I wanna bring it back to you again, just as part of the chair of the land use and zoning, to see if there are any last specific questions you may have, or a specific question, or if you want, you can actually carry some of those questions over to next week.
We can,
If you think you might get some of them answered through the information that's gonna be posted on the.
we can carry over. I think it would just be great if there are other objectives from the other subcommittees that you think land use has a place in solving them, or like at least making them more achievable, then flag it loud and clear in the
Yep.
spreadsheet. Things like density. We're talking a lot about density in our land use and zoning subcommittee, but we want to make sure that we're talking about the right areas and in the right way.
Yep.
So those are that's what I'd say to wrap this up.
Okay. We're certainly not wrapping anything up.
But in terms of like questions
I
from land
understand.
use.
Kobe, you wanted to respond to?
Yeah, and I'm not interested in wrapping up until it's wrapped up. I attempted to start this conversation with a vision based on the conversations I've been having in the two committees that I think are perhaps most relevant to land use. And so I would maybe bring it back to that. A lot of it was building upon what's currently there, identifying some prioritization of housing, and really the additive concept is a concept of neighborhoods in the places identified. I mean, how does that sit with you? How does that react with you? Because we can all go back to our groups and add the pieces. Okay, if we're gonna do connected neighborhoods, well, here's what we think neighborhood housing should look like, and here's what you guys are saying. All right, well, here's how we'd have to change the zoning to meet that. You know, that is my attempt to say, here's what I've been hearing out of the two subcommittees. From the top, do you have a reaction?
The map?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very similar to what we've been talking about.
Okay. This is the good dialogue. This is what we need to hear.
And does anyone think that like there's a major miss, or there's a, you know?
I did have some questions.
Yeah, and I would be curious just to see, you had sort of that sidebar of like, these are overarching priorities, or I can't remember what you called it. Is that something that, as a master plan committee, that we're all going to sort of agree to?
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and this is a document that lives in my head, not in the master plan.
Is it on the drive?
No.
Oh, do you wanna share it?
I don't know.
Oh, do you wanna share it on the drive?
You can
Because there
sh- you
seems to be,
You can share it, it's not necessarily
no.
content that may or may not make it into the master plan.
It's my tool for communicating.
Would you like to share it on the drive?
Happy to share it on the drive.
Okay, and then I think at that time, you know, that can come up in the next subcommittee
Yep.
meetings to kind of put the list of questions together and maybe tweak it, so, you know, whatever input is provided to kind of meet everybody's goals for all the subcommittees.
Can I make a suggestion
Certainly.
through the chair? Can we print it out really largely, and at our next meeting, look at the map as we're having conversations about some follow-up conversations about some of these
Kobe's map.
topics?
Yeah.
Kobe's map, our version of the map,
Mhm.
how they compare, where we see opportunities and challenges,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how that
Sure.
might
That'd be great.
inform goals.
I'll even bring my darts in, and we can throw.
Well,
darts
now
in.
you're really
No,
making the
they,
meeting exciting.
I still have stickers from.
Dots,
Oh,
yeah,
From the
yeah.
open house.
I mean,
We have stickers.
Yeah, we still have stickers left over.
I mean,
That's a great
Yeah.
Sticky
I
notes.
think it'll be the most productive if we're all around the map
Yeah.
together and just having the conversation and
Yeah.
having it be a little
Mhm.
less formal. I don't know. Just a thought.
And then also, once we have the compiled goals and objectives list, we're sort of looking at this map and these priorities and the definitions and all these things, and making sure we're not missing
Yep.
anything big.
Now, Jen, I agree with your comment about making things a little less formal.
I know they have to be.
It's kind of hard not to, because as you can see, just even from tonight's discussions, things do have a tendency to veer off, and we don't want to veer off in too many different directions unless we have a fairly clear question behind it. Tonight's really just kind of a Q&A cross contents. Hopefully we can get some of those answers tonight. I think a lot has already come out of tonight. My understanding, Amy, and refresh me my memory if I'm wrong, is you're gonna take the general format that you've already generated, and that Janelle's already generated, and Meg's kind of generated, and gel that all into one usable spreadsheet
Mhm.
that everybody's going to have the ability to put their content into, so that everybody has an opportunity to see what each subcommittee or each content area has
Correct.
for goals and objectives, so that they can review those goals and objectives.
Mhm.
Hopefully, some of those goals and objectives will answer whatever the cross questions may be for
Mhm.
each specific subcommittee,
Mhm.
and then come back fielding questions next week,
Correct.
so that we can continue this process. Now, folks, I do want to make this clear to everybody. For as much as, for as many questions as there may be, and for as much work as there still needs to be done, rushing through this is going to do nothing. We need to kind of take these and focus in on what the specific goals, objectives, and ultimately to kind of what Brian's point and Eric's point was earlier, is now we've got a goal. Like, for instance, Bellingham and Franklin collaborative on potentially doing something with Gorelick Farms in that area or over there. That's great. Write those things down. Put them into Q&A, put them into whatever. We can start actually defining these goals and objectives so that they're clear, objectionable, and then as to Eric's point, we now have something to work towards. Now, how do we actually implement that? That is where everyone's minds kind of need to start going towards, is once we get past these Q&As, once we get this sheet kind of laid out and all the goals and objectives done, is, all right, how do we implement them? To Joe's point earlier, yes, this all costs money. So that, and to the other point that was laid out earlier, think big picture though. You know, think big picture, say, hey, we'd like to do this, but in the meantime, also think fiduciary.
I like the thought that it all costs money. It doesn't all cost money. There are also many of these, that cost next to nothing. Changing zoning in the way that which it's developed so that the market can come in and play in a space in the way that we want costs very little to the town, and has the potential for revenue. That's one. Two is many of these are not luxuries or special things that we like to have, but rather investments in ourselves that have genuine returns on property value, on livability, which improve property values, which improves our ability. Because that's how we get our revenue. So
Which improves our
we do have investments, and we do have opportunities to change the underlying rules for low cost.
Janelle?
I agree with that, and to the point of educating our fellow community members, we struggled with that a little bit. Like, I think our first meeting, we were saying, how do we educate people? Let's throw it in as a goal. Again, maybe not our responsibility as a subcommittee, but maybe in the master plan, we just have a really well thought out executive summary that explains that this is, Franklin is growing, and we are embracing change in a positive way and trying to grow into where we want to go, right? And this is the way we're doing it. We want to implement some things to get us there that may have a cost, and there may be things that will save money or generate revenue for the town, and so forth. Just sort of explaining in a one-pager for anybody that might happen upon this document.
I haven't brought it back yet because we haven't really had an opportunity to get this, because I want to stay focused on what our goals are. But what we're ultimately going to be doing is actually going back to our original goals, the mission statements, and everything else that we talked about at the beginning, and finishing the redefinitions of what we started, as well as what is the community engagement portion of all of this, where I think a big part of that's going to fall under. That will be kind of wrapping this up as we work through the implementation portion. And then we also have an introduction, which collaboratively with the group and myself, we'll be writing that introduction. Then of course there's the remainder of the community vision and goals that we need to finish up. So this will be, once we get through May, we get through the goals and objectives towards the implementation, this will end up back on the agenda for us to talk about and finalize. So, all right. Amy?
I think I'm all set. Just think, get all this together and have it ready for the next meeting, and
Why? We got a meeting next Wednesday night,
Yes.
is that what you said? Because I don't find it anywhere in any
It's
of
on
my
the,
emails.
it's on the town calendar.
I don't think it is.
It's on the town
No,
calendar.
but I'll get it posted tomorrow.
I thought it was on the town calendar. No.
It's Wednesday,
It's on
not
your
Thursday?
calendar. Master plan committee.
Don't you have a council
What?
meeting that night?
Not next week.
Okay.
Oh.
Is it on there? What?
Nope.
Oh, it's on there. The
Yeah.
15th? It's on there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's on there.
There
It's not
isn't
the
anything on,
15th.
the 15th.
It's on the town calendar.
Yep, it's on the town calendar. I looked
Yeah.
at it today. Yeah.
Yeah.
Should be under the town
I
calendar.
looked at all your emails and you never said anything about the 15th. Oh, if you
It's-
put it on the calendar, that's fine.
Well, I
don't
haven't
look at
sent the
calendar.
email yet.
Yeah.
But it's on the town calendar.
Last
That's
meeting-
actually-
Last meeting we
by
worked
the
on
way,
schedule.
We finish. Are we all set? And just way of clarification, we're going to be putting in the goals and objectives into, what I mean is the subcommittee is gonna be putting the goals and objectives into the spreadsheet when Amy finalizes it. Generate questions or try to hopefully get some of your questions answered based off of it. Next week, on the 15th, bring back any further questions and any further discussion we have on those. I'm gonna move on to agenda item 4, review the timeline schedule, next steps and expectations. It's basically just what I've been talking about. Our next meeting is the 15th, but one thing I wanna point out is the actual May schedule. The town council, we have a meeting on the 22nd, and I believe it's the 22nd, 23rd, our budget
Yeah.
meetings?
Mhm.
I thought so. So we could actually be back on the 29th, because we have to do a presentation on goals and objectives, do we not?
So the plan was to do a public hearing
Right.
on the May 29th. I think that seeing that there's probably a lot more conversation going on, it's okay to push it a week or two into June. I mean, especially with you guys having your FinCom meetings week before. So I think that's something we could think about at the next meeting on the 15th, if we want to move forward
Yeah,
with
that's-
that, or push it out a few weeks. We have time to push it out. Doesn't have to be that May 29th, but if we want to make
May
sure
is
that we're
busy.
ready. I know,
Because
it's
June 11th is
become
right
very,
around the corner.
I know, very busy. So
Yeah.
I would say, people want to come up with a couple ideas for June, bring it to the next meeting, and I haven't posted anything for the May 29th, so if we want to start thinking about,
Yep.
we need to push it out a couple weeks,
We can add that
can do
to
so.
next week's discussion.
Yeah, I was going to put that on the
Yeah.
agenda for next week.
Colby had a comment?
Just that we equally could, couch the meeting as not a finalized goals and objectives or finalized draft one of the goals and objectives, but rather, a snapshot
Or
of
it
where
could be-
it's
could be-
currently
It
evolved.
could be a summary, it
Just-
doesn't
Which
necessarily.
Giving
I
ourselves
thought
some
it would be
flexibility with
anyways.
scheduling.
Say
Yeah, which I thought it would be anyways. I just don't want too much crunch time
Yeah.
right before the 29th. It could just be 1 week. I mean, it could just be the following week if that worked out
Yeah.
better. I just don't want too much crunch time.
We'll see where we are at that point.
Okay.
I would hate to say yes at this point without
Right.
knowing what lies
Right.
ahead. So,
We
okay,
can leave it up in the air right now.
good stuff. Anybody have anything specific that they don't feel like they've had answered, or not yet, Bruce?
No, I wasn't gonna do that.
Oh, yeah,
I was
No,
just
you
gonna
lost.
mention one thing, you mentioned about the pool room and the Chinese restaurant.
Yeah.
When Gino and I were kids, the pool room used to be in the old police station, which used to be under the
Right.
Zia
Yeah, right,
Theater.
right across from the tannery, right by the Sun Tannery place, right there on, that side street.
Yeah,
over
yeah.
It
there.
was where the theater, it was
Yeah,
under
yeah,
the
yeah.
theater.
Yeah,
That was where the old police station was,
yeah. Oh,
so.
no, oh, right, okay. Remember when there was a police station downtown right next to where the pizza place used to be, right next to, used to be a
East
police
Street there was one.
substation.
Next to
Right.
the fire station it was.
Yeah,
No,
it
he actually had a police, right next to where, right where the tobacco place is downtown, the bad looking.
Used to be under the thing, I don't remember, Gino, you remember that?
Yeah, it was under.
Yeah, I actually
Under the
played
thing,
billiards
no.
at that billiard hall.
We're
across
looking
the street.
forward.
Sounds like you had a lot of visits at the police station. That's what it sounds like.
Well,
10 years from now, what do we want to
If
see?
you've ever visited the current police department, you'll find out why we need a new police department.
Yeah.
So, because, anyways.
Not a
Hey,
depart,
Bruce.
not a department of building.
What do you
Motion
think?
to adjourn.
Second.
All in everyone is actually in the room,
Yeah, so we can just do.
so we're gonna do all in favor.
So,
Aye.
thank you, Val. She took my tongue. All in favor?
Non-debatable.
Undebatable. Mel wants to be chair.
Yeah, what happened?
All set, folks. Great job. Thank you, everybody. And
Well, he wouldn't say it.
Recording stopped.